Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
Welcome to Missing in Canada, an ongoing series by the Nighttime Podcast.
Hello listeners, and welcome to Missing in Canada, an ongoing series by the Nighttime Podcast that explores the stories and circumstances of Canadian missing persons cases. In this episode, our story will take us to Pennfield, New Brunswick, more specifically to McKay's Blueberries. If you're unfamiliar with McKay's, like I was, it's a small roadside food vendor that sells wild blueberries and blueberry-related products to passing motorists. But their products, as delicious as I imagine they are, aren't why Nighttime is taking you there. McKay's Blueberries provides the setting for an important part of tonight's story. On August 18th of 2021, just after 4 p.m., Paul Doughty, a frail 76-year-old man from the neighboring community of Musquash, walked into the store and bought a blueberry pie and a small cupcake-type treat. The business's security camera shows a very thin elderly man pay the cashier with a bill he pulls from his pocket and walks across the parking lot towards his parked vehicle, pie in hand. Now, this otherwise uneventful interaction is the last time Paul Doughty was seen. And as you can likely imagine, his family is desperate for answers. And very shortly, you're going to hear directly from them. Tonight, in this episode of Nighttime, I'll be joined by Paul Doughty's daughter, Cheryl, to discuss the still unexplained disappearance of her 76-year-old father.
On August 18th, 76-year-old Paul Doughty stopped by McKay's Wild Blueberries in Pennfield, and as far as we know, no one's seen him since.
He was there around 4:30, and he just bought some desserts and left, and we don't know what way he went from there.
His granddaughter, now hanging missing persons posters, says this is unlike him, that he doesn't have dementia, and no one knows where he might have gone.
And I think I'm just going to put them out everywhere at this point, because we don't know where he could be.
The family thinks he drove alone that Wednesday afternoon from his home in Musquash and could have driven anywhere after. RCMP tell Global News officers across the province are on the lookout.
So just to start, Cheryl, why don't you give me a bit of background on you? Like, who are you and where are you from? Maybe tell us a bit about you.
Well, I'm from St. John, and I'm the only daughter of Paul's. There's four boys. We lost one brother back in 1992, March of 1992. So yeah, I'm the youngest and the only girl in the family.
Nice. Well, tell me a bit about your family. Let's start with that. So you had, as you mentioned there, a couple brothers, you the only daughter. What was your family like, and where originally is your family from, or are you originally from St. John?
Well, I grew up mostly in Laurenville, which isn't really too far away from St. John, probably maybe, I don't know, 15-20 minute drive. And I think I lived there till I was about 12, and I think that's when we moved to Musquash. So I was around 12 years old then. But I mean, we had a pretty good childhood, outside playing, all the, no complaints. A little bit of family drama, but who doesn't have that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, it was a good childhood.
Yeah, and like, how would you describe your family as far as like how you would have spent time in, just like maybe like the kind of people you were in terms of what you valued and whatnot?
We were kind of like the neighborhood house. That's where all the kids gathered. Anyone we hung out with all went. We lived in a trailer back then, so I mean, it wasn't that big. So I mean, we always had a house full, and we were always outside playing and stuff. And I mean, we lived all around the woods, so always out building camps and that. And my brothers and my father would tinker around with their little toys, ATCs and buggies and you name it. And like I said, there was a little bit of family drama, but nothing at a, my brothers were a little bit of a handful there for a while.
Yeah, well, you can't spell family without drama, and especially if you got a couple kids in rural New Brunswick, I'm sure drama finds its way to every family. Well, let's talk a bit about your dad, where it's like the story and our conversation is going to surround him. But what, like, growing up as a kid, what was his life like, and what did he do for a career back when he was working?
Dad, he worked at Colson Cove for quite a bit of his life. And I know I believe he worked construction for a while, but he really enjoyed, like, he'd buy secondhand cars and stuff, fix them up and sell them, lawnmowers. Like, he was always tinkering around, like buying and fixing up, reselling.
Okay.
That was like his main hobby. Like, he really enjoyed that. And back in the day, he used to hunt and fish and all that fun stuff.
So was he like a outdoorsman kind of guy? You mentioned you lived in the woods.
In his younger years, as he got older, like, he did go fishing the odd time, but I think he was kind of a little leery when he got up in age, that going out by himself and stuff, right? So that kind of dwindled over the years.
You know, at the time of your dad's disappearance, which we're going to be talking about, he was 76. So I only can assume that he wasn't working by that point.
No,
but
no.
what was like, and he wasn't living with you, I'm sure, either. So tell me a bit about his life at this point, like 76-year-old Paul Doughty.
Well, it's kind of sad, really, because my mom passed away from cancer in August of 2019, and they were married, I believe, for 55 years.
Wow. Okay.
So, I mean, when he lost mom, he was that was the love of his life, right? So, I mean, it was rough on him, but my brother lived with him for quite a long time, up until probably a few weeks or so before he disappeared. But I mean, he went to the cemetery, I think, every day to fix it up there and to talk with her. I mean, that was just his thing, going up there. And I mean, all things considered, he did okay for losing the love of his life, but I mean, he struggled with it. I mean, good days and bad days, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he made out all right. I mean, I helped him with what I could, bills and stuff like that, and but he did okay.
Mm-hmm. And what would have a regular day be like for your dad at this point before his disappearance, other than visiting your mom's grave? Like, how would he have spent his time?
Well, none of us are big visitors. Like, we're all real homebodies, all of us. And I mean, we weren't big on the visiting thing. Yeah, but we talked like a lot on the phone, especially after my mom died, because mom was like my go-to person. Then when mom passed, dad became my daily chat kind of person. But I mean, he'd go in town to the mall and that, and chit chat with the workers and like the different grocery stores and stuff. And he'd go grab a coffee and sit at a nice park or something. And like, he just loved chit chatting with people. So he'd go anywhere that anybody would talk to him. So that's what he enjoyed.
Yeah, in general, like, he's 76, so like his health would be a question. What kind of condition and shape was he in, like, health-wise at this point?
I mean, he had cancer. I'm gonna say, I'm not good with timing, but I'm gonna say 6 or 7 years ago, he ended up having to get I believe it's called an ileostomy. So he had a colostomy bag that he had to wear. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he was frail. I mean, he was aging. I mean, typical, moodiness. The confusion wasn't too bad, a little bit from time to time, but I didn't feel like it was anything to be completely panicked about by any means. Mm-hmm. But I mean, generally the colostomy, like, he hated that. That just gave him grief. Like, he just had a hard time looking after it and stuff. But I mean, like I said, he was a trooper. He fought through all these obstacles. So he did okay, all things considered.
Yeah, my thought about like the colostomy bag, it's something like that I would think would probably impede on his freedom and kind of further restrict him. And the photos that I saw of your dad, you said frail, but he definitely looks like a thin guy.
He is. He was probably, he'd be lucky. I'm going to say around the 100-pound mark, but he'd be lucky if he was that towards the end.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on now to talking about the events that immediately surround his disappearance. So starting with this, is when did, like you mentioned, you weren't always in touch with visiting and whatnot as a family. When did your family realize that something was up, that he was unaccounted for? Like, how did you learn about this?
Well, I was actually out shopping with my husband and my youngest daughter, and I received a call from my youngest brother, Jamie. Mm-hmm. And my father had called him, and he asked Jamie if he was coming in town, if he could pick him up a pie. Mm-hmm. And he was mentioning about possibly renting his house out and moving into town. And I don't know, my brother just, it was kind of an odd conversation, but anyway, my brother couldn't do anything because he works on a boat. So he was out in the middle of the ocean. So anyway, he called me, and pretty much instantly I started calling Dad, and no answer, no answer, no answer. And this went on like all throughout the day and evening. So if I remember correctly, I believe that evening my husband and I took a drive to Musquash just to check things out. And I mean, his car wasn't in the yard. The house was locked up, but like his sheds and stuff were left open because he was probably tinkering around in the yard, which isn't really super normal for my dad. But if he was in a hurry and just wanted to run down and get his pie and back home, maybe he just didn't think to lock everything up, right? But anyway, we went back home, and I believe I was probably scheduled to work in the morning, I'm going to say, because I get up at like 4:45 for work, but it was like kind of a restless night, and I kept calling probably every hour on the hour, no answer. So, I mean, eventually you kind of start getting a little sleepy. So at some point I had fallen asleep. And when I woke up through the night, I'm just thinking, maybe he got home and he knows I have to get up early for work and just didn't dare call me and wake me up. So anyway, when I got up in the morning, I started calling again, and of course, no answer, because I thought even if his phone died, if he's home, plug it in, whatever, right? So anyway, if I worked that day, I didn't go because I think it was like 8:30 in the morning that I called the RCMP and reported him missing. So kind of all evolved or took off from there.
August 18th of 2021 is when he's last seen, and it's when people read about your dad, often what's mentioned is that his last known whereabouts were visiting a sort of roadside blueberry farm stand. Like you mentioned, he had talked to your brother about wanting a pie. It sounds like the last thing your dad is known to have done is went to this roadside kind of stand and bought a blueberry pie.
Yep. I think I'm trying to keep all these events straight, so just bear with me, because I believe August 20th, I believe staff from McKay's Blueberry stand reached out to the RCMP to confirm that he had been there. And the RCMP went there to talk with the staff and that, but at that time, I don't think RCMP asked if they had any form of surveillance cameras or anything of that nature. On the 23rd, someone from the Blueberry stand reached out to my daughter and sent her a picture of Dad on camera at McKay's. So that was one of the things we were a little angry about, because we're thinking they're RCMP officers. Why didn't they ask if they had surveillance footage? And yes, maybe the people at the Blueberry stand should have mentioned it, but this came to light like 3 days after the RCMP had been there to speak to them. So
yeah, because what I was wondering and is how it was determined, or how they figured out that your dad had visited. But just by you giving the timeline, I'm guessing your dad was reported missing. But there was probably some local media coverage.
There was, yeah.
And then someone at the Blueberry stand said like, "Whoa, I saw him here a couple days back."
Yeah, that's how it went. I'm assuming either the RCMP post or our post all over social media. So
wow, and as you say there, they informed the RCMP, we think he was here. But when I guess, I think I saw someone from the Blueberry stand quote it, or I call it the Blueberry stand, but I guess it's like a storefront for a farm. But
it's pretty much a stand, a little blueberry stand. That's what I call it.
But what I've read is that they weren't, as you said, they actively sought out your family. Like, listen, like here's the video, and those videos and photo of him parking his car and going in there and ordering, like that's all on the internet now and like being shared around. But it's kind of amazing that the store had the like kind of the ambition or whatever to contact your family and share that.
Terrific. And I think that's one of the biggest meltdowns I had with the RCMP, because there was a lot of miscommunication, because from what we understood, we were told that there had to be an absolute sighting of him either on camera, or they would have to find his vehicle or something to get search and rescue in there. So that really set me off that day, because I'm thinking, like, if you needed to catch him on camera or something to get a search out there, like something concrete, well, why didn't you just ask them on the 20th, like if they had any form of surveillance there? So that was really upsetting. But I mean, I try to be the bigger person and kind of let that go and move forward from here. Because I mean, I don't know, I guess they're not perfect either. No one is. So
yeah, but it's initially when you report, you know, a 76-year-old man missing, like what sense did you get from the RCMP as to their react? Like, did it seem like it was something they were really taking seriously? Because I can only assume your family was freaking out, you know, the next day for certain.
Well, the biggest issue is, and I won't, obviously not going to name specific officers, but there was an officer that had dealt with my father and my brother who was living there at the time, because there was a little teeny bit of an altercation at their house one night. Okay. And anyway, it was just, in my opinion, now it was just a bunch of foolishness. But anyway, one of the RCMP officers that are currently working the case was at the house, and he listened to a lot of what my brother had to say regarding Dad. So I think it was kind of made to seem like Dad was right off his rocker or something. So this is the information that this officer had coming into this missing person case with him now. So he just couldn't seem to get off that train of thought that Dad was just not in his right mind that day, and went up where his car was found and got lost. So that was very frustrating, because when you know this is your father, you know him a little bit better than a person that's met him like once. So it was frustrating.
Yeah, I understand. And the video of him in the McKay's Blueberrie stand, it certainly doesn't show any unusual or outstanding behavior. It just looks like your typical little old man going in and buying a blueberry pie.
Yeah. No, for sure.
When you watched that video and saw the photos of him going in the store, did it stand out to you in any way, or did that just look like your typical Dad?
No, he did. I don't know. He just looked like Dad was looking frail anyway, because I mean, he was 76, and like I said, he just lost his wife. Like, I'm not going to say he was all happy-go-lucky, because I mean, I'd be lying, but I mean, you know, it was upsetting just to see him on there, period, because given what the situation was, and just it's just awful. It was not good.
And I don't know the area of New Brunswick where these locations are. I don't know well, but I know that where the Blueberrie stand is a community called Pennfield, which I believe is just a short distance from where your dad was living. Just for people who have never been to this part of the province, tell us a little bit about like kind of this area. What would it be like if you were to visit Mogwash, Pennfield?
It's Musquash.
Musquash. Sorry. Thank you.
Musquash is just like mosquito land. It's a beautiful area, but I mean, it's wooded and that. I mean, it's a subdivision that he lived in, but the Pennfield area where he went missing, it's vast. There's a lot of woods, there's lakes, there's bodies of water. It's just vast. That's the only way to describe it.
Yeah. Would it be like, kind of like a cottage country area where people would have summer homes, or is it even just too rural for that even?
Oh no, there's camps all over there. Like, it's the woods.
And would your dad, other than, you know, being from a community next door sort of thing, would he have any connection to Pennfield? Like, I'm guessing
yes, he's familiar. Well, he met my mother like down St. Stephen way and that. So I mean, he's familiar with from St. John right through to Calais. Like, he's familiar with all those areas.
So as far as the actual events that surround your dad's last known whereabouts, he goes into the Blueberrie stand, buys a blueberry pie. He's from that point on, initially he's not seen again, and not only is he missing, but initially his car was missing as well. But and I think that went on for like a month or so. But initially, what was the idea that your family had as to what happened when him and the car were missing?
Well, in the beginning of the investigation, it was a wild goose chase. There was false sightings coming in from everywhere. Like the RCMP were just running. Like, they were all false sightings. Somebody even said they found a bumper down Pennfield Way that had part of his license plate, they think, on it. That bumper was never found. We drove around looking for it and stuff. Like, we just didn't understand it. And we were just like, once we found out he was by McKay's, we just wanted like a helicopter or something out looking, because we just didn't know, right?
Yeah, and again, we're McKay's Blueberrie Farm in Pennfield is so rural. I'm sure there's a ton of, rural roads and dirt roads and gravel roads that go in all different directions. So was the kind of the theory or the idea that you had initially that maybe he got confused and drove off in the wrong direction or something? Was that something you were thinking?
Do you know what? In all honesty, I kept thinking it was August. That was the month my mom passed away. It was like August 7th. This was the 18th. And I know that bothers him. So I don't know. I thought maybe he just had to get out of the house because memories. And I thought maybe he just needed, to get away for the day. Like that's initially what I thought. I thought it was odd that he never answered his phone because that's normally not my father. But I mean, his phone was discovered home, so he didn't have it.
Yeah, but things certainly change when his vehicle is found without him in it. I think it was about a month and a half later, if my memory serves me. It was late September.
2 weeks after. September 1st, it was found. Yeah. Okay,
so and where was it found in relation to like the Blueberrie Farm in Pennfield?
It was found approximately 1 kilometer down a very rough dirt logging road, hidden, completely concealed in foliage and stuff. Like if you were on an ATV or something, chances are you wouldn't have seen it because it took the helicopter to spot it. Because it was, I got to see a picture. The RCMP, I got to see a picture before it was touched from an RCMP officer. You could not see that car. It was completely hidden. And my dad babied his vehicles. My dad was proud of his vehicles. He looked after his vehicles. You could eat off his floors. Mm-hmm. So there's no way my dad would have driven that and ditched it up in those woods, up in the bushes. No.
And when you say hidden, and based on the photo you saw, did it seem like hidden in terms of like it was kind of driven off the road into a bush, or did it seem like concealed, like intentionally?
Oh no, it was concealed. No one would ever change my mind on that. It was hidden.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, no doubt. And anyone that knew my father, knows my father, said Paul would never take his car up there. Never.
So even if he was confused and made a wrong turn or something for some reason and ended up on this road, you would think he would just stop on the road if he were to get out or something. There would be no reason to then hide the car in some way.
No, and you got to take into consideration, this is summertime, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, okay, it's summertime. It's daylight till almost 10 o'clock at night, okay? We walked that roadway back and forth to where his car was. Probably took us an hour and a half or so, roughly. So you could have walked out of there in daylight, no time at all from the last time he was seen at the Blueberry stand. No, it was daylight late. So
mm-hmm.
It's not like you went in there and got lost.
Yeah. And then another aspect of this is, as you said originally, is the RCMP, if they had surveillance proving he was in that area, that may have kind of sped up their search in the beginning. So I can only imagine it was pretty frustrating that his vehicle is found so close to where he was last seen. And then you consider that the McKay's Blueberrie Farm went as far as to reach out to them and say, he was here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they spoke to a couple employees. This is before the video was brought to our attention. They did speak to a couple of employees there that confirmed that he was there. Mm-hmm. Why they didn't mention anything about a surveillance camera then, who knows? But I mean, I appreciate everything they did to help us anyway. But I mean, the RCMP, that's kind of their job to look into that kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this: is when your dad and the vehicle are missing, there's still kind of initially there's still the possibility he just needed to get away, or got lost, or he's in some other town or something. Yeah. When the vehicle is I can only imagine your family would have had a lot of hope at that point that he'd turn up. But when the vehicle is found without him, how did that change how you felt? And
I knew right then. As soon as they said he's not in the car, I was like, something happened. Like, I just knew it. I mean, I know my father. I'm 46 years old. I've been with my father all my life. I mean, I know him on a personal level that no RCMP officer can know. Mm-hmm. So I knew something wasn't right. When they found his car, well, that was enough for search and rescue to finally get involved, because without a starting point, they would not go out anywhere, which I do understand now, because I mean, but then I mean, I was crazy. I was going crazy. It's my father. I don't know where he is, right? But anyway, when search and rescue went in for, it wasn't quite 3 days. I'm going to say 2.5 days they were in there. But anyway, they were planning to pull out, and we were told that there is one dog here in New Brunswick that has remains ability, and this search and rescue person owned this dog. Well, she was talking about getting the dog up in there in the future, but she should have chose her wording better when we were in the command center, because she basically said that the bear hunters were getting pissed off because they have traps and bait out and stuff, and didn't want the dog, you know, out and about. And of course, I'm not gonna lie, I lost it. I said a few choice swear words, F the bear hunters, and I left the command post because I was mad. I went and sat in my niece's car because she should have chose her wording better. So we had to fight, because she was mad at my family at this point. So we had to fight and fight and fight to try to get that dog back up where his car was. Finally, she was kind enough to bring the dog up briefly where his car was, but it didn't hit on anything of interest. So, and we went up there searching and searching and searching, and haven't found one trace of him up in those woods.
Would there be, so nothing was found in the search. Was there, as far as like his vehicle and stuff, was there anything left behind that would indicate any possible reason he's, you know, is not there?
There was not so much any clue as to why he wasn't there, but there were things found in his vehicle. And I mean, they did forensics on that vehicle, but take into consideration that vehicle sat in those woods with the window partially cracked for 2 weeks. And the slightest thing, we were told by RCMP, the slightest thing like moisture can affect like fingerprints, different things like that, right? So, I mean, there was empty bank envelopes found in his vehicle, because he could have had up to $1,000 on him that day. Okay, there was empty bank envelopes found in there. Somebody had written down a number to a guy, because he went to the Blueberry stand. He was interested in an old truck that was sitting by the Blueberry factory, and he knows the guy that owns the Blueberry factory. So somebody had given him this guy's number, because this guy that owns it was out working in the Blueberry field. So Dad probably hung around there, and whatever happened until this guy was done in the fields and he could talk to him about this truck, right? So whatever happened shortly after he was seen there.
I don't know if I expected this, but you say whatever happened, and I didn't know that the vehicle, your dad's vehicle, was thought to be like concealed. Do you, like, what, if you're comfortable saying, like, are you pretty confident in the fact that something happened to your dad that led to him disappearing?
Absolutely. I can't say too much at this point because there's things being looked into, but some information came to light that is currently being investigated, and I just got that feeling we're on the right track. Good. And we have a new area of interest to search as well now because of this information. So as soon as the snow lets up and we're able to get in there, hopefully in a couple of weeks, we'll be searching that new area.
Yeah, and that's another aspect of this, is he disappeared end of August, vehicle found in September. Not long after that, in, you know, rural New Brunswick, I'm sure it's the weather isn't conducive for walking around in the woods searching. So I'm assuming a lot of this was called off for the last several months as far as like on the ground searching.
Yeah, well, search and rescue, like they were only bound to do like a 1 kilometer radius because they look at Dad's health, his age. So once they searched that 1 kilometer radius around where his car was found, technically they could just pull out if nothing was found. If they would have found something like a shoe, a hat, anything, they could have gone further. But sadly, that wasn't the case. So
we've talked a bit already about the idea of him like possibly being confused or something, and I think I only bring that up maybe because, you know, if someone who's almost 80 years old, something unusual happens, your mind would lead towards like Alzheimer's and stuff. But in terms of like and I've seen you quoted as saying he had like mild confusion from time to time.
Yeah.
Can you kind of tell me like how that would kind of manifest itself? Like a period of time where you're like, oh, dad is, that you would describe your dad as being slightly confused. So like, what would that be like for him?
Well, it's just there was a couple times like he was having an issue with his hemoglobin levels a few times, and that's when this tended to happen.
Mm.
And I mean, there was a couple times that he really, was getting paranoid and everything because of it. But this didn't happen like continuously. And then another time this happened, it was a issue with his medication that he was on because the dosage was wrong. I think it was prednisone or something that he was on. So he had a bad spell back, but that was back quite a few years ago that happened. But I mean, generally, he, for the most part, had his wits about him. Like I said, he did have his moments when he, get a little bit, I don't know if he'd call it paranoid about things, but I mean, he's getting old, was getting kind of old and cranky-ish too sometimes.
Yeah. No, I think anyone who cares for like an elderly parent, or if you're fortunate enough to have your grandparents still around, what you're describing with like, maybe a new medicine or something made them, a little strange. That's very normal stuff. But in Paul, your dad's case, it's not like you were like, dad's, he has Alzheimer's or something. Like, it's not like anything like that was going on.
No, and I mean, like I said, I'm not going to say his health was like, or mental health was like tip top, but I mean, you got to take into consideration, like the man just lost the woman he was with for 55 years. I mean, I was pretty proud of him, all things considered, that he did as well as he did. I mean, no doubt it was heartbreaking being at the house without her, but I mean, I give him kudos for the way he survived after she passed.
So at this point now, we're 7 months.
7 months, yeah, a little over 7 months. Yeah.
Like, is there any hope left that your dad is going to be found
alive? No, because if he, let's just say he ran into some trouble with someone up there, or persons, he would have been an easy target. I mean, he's an old man, he's frail. I mean, he wasn't super good on his feet on a good day. So, I mean, he was just vulnerable. I mean, he would have been the perfect target for any shady person, I guess. And then given like the colonoscopy bag or whatever it's called, and any medication he's on, it's not like he could go off the grid for 6 months and just show up like, I've been out west working. Like even with that ostomy bag that he had to wear, like he wouldn't even go too far for too long because he was scared that would get working and stuff. He was self-conscious about it, right? So he was, that stopped him from doing a lot of things for any amount of time. So I knew it was not, he didn't just take off or and he had a few things he was looking forward to too. I can't get into too much detail about that either, but he had some things that were looking up. So I mean, he had things to look forward to, that he wouldn't just go do something to himself or just
Yeah, and you don't see that as a possibility, that he chose to walk away from it all, so to speak. So for people who are listening or watching this that are just now learning about your dad and his disappearance, is there anything that we, the average person, could do to support you or to help in any way? Well, it's just, we are always on social media making posts all the time. I just put a reward poster out not too long ago. Things like this, great help. I appreciate it. News, the media, we haven't touched a lot with the media. We were on there once, but I just, like I said, down the road, if need be, I would do it again, but it really just makes me uncomfortable. Last time my niece was there and kind of supported me through it. So just share a post. And I mean, if somebody knows something, have the courage to speak up. I mean, I know it's not easy and people get scared, but I mean, just put yourself in our shoes. If it was your loved one, you'd want to get to the bottom of what happened and find him. I just want to lay him to rest with my mom. That's my goal, is to find him and lay him to rest with her. Before I wrap up this episode, I have 2 additional pieces of our conversation that I want to share. As it often happens, when we finished our official talk, we continued talking, albeit slightly more casually. And while doing so, we ended up touching on what, to me, were some interesting points. Fortunately, for all of us, I didn't turn off my recorder, so I'm going to be able to share these 2 clips. First, I want to share with you a brief discussion about what actually happened to the blueberry pie that Paul was last seen purchasing. I don't know if this would ever make its way to you, but he was last seen buying a blueberry pie. When they found his car, do you know if it was in the car, the pie?
Yeah. Yes. He bought a blueberry pie, but he also bought a personal size little treat. I don't know if it was I think it was some type of a cake that he bought. Anyway, when the RCMP originally took the car to their garage and it was in there for quite some time, then they released it to us. The pie was still in there, molded and disgusting, and coffee cups were still in there with mold all over them. So I'm assuming forensics must have went to their garage to do all this testing, because everything that I wanted looked at was in the car. So I'm assuming they went there to dust or do whatever they did. Oh. Not that I'm confident that but yeah, anyway.
The only reason I ask about the pie is I just thought, like, for whatever reason he gets lost in his vehicle and he's hungry or something, he'd just eat the pie. He wouldn't get out and walk into the woods, hide his car and walk into the woods. You know, the last piece of audio I want to share with you is when Cheryl described to me the positive change that she and a small group of other families in similar situations have been working on squeezing out of their tragic circumstances. I know that there was that getting his phone records was something that you or your family were making attempts to do. Well,
I mean, I had a online account for Dad's cell phone, so I could get on there and see some of the numbers that he called or that called him, but there's like a lot of unknown names and numbers from especially the day before, because it was a pretty day the day before. But anyway, I was at RCMP to try to get these phone records and waited, and then come to find out, because we had no missing person act here in New Brunswick that made it easier for them to get this private information. They couldn't get them, so myself and two other ladies with missing loved ones teamed up, and we are fighting to get a missing person act passed here in New Brunswick, which is supposed to be brought to legislation in the fall. So that's kind of a positive thing that'll hopefully come out of all this.
So in this missing persons legislation would be like something that would enable people in your position with a missing loved one to have more power to, you know, subpoena phone records, bank records, get Facebook passwords. Like, that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, especially it's more for the RCMP and like the police. Like, they don't have to go through all this red tape to try to get all these warrants and this, that, and the other thing. It just makes it easier and quicker for them to get access to Facebook, phone messages, what have you.
So I suppose that's another way people could help support your family, is if they contact their MLA to express their support of a bill like this.
Absolutely. Much appreciated. Yep. Absolutely.
I want to thank you for joining Cheryl and I for our discussion surrounding the disappearance of her father, Paul Doughty. For those listening who'd like to become more involved in this story and follow future updates, Cheryl invites you all to join the Bring Paul Doughty Home Facebook group, where she shares updates and important news related to the search for her father. I've added a link to the group in the episode description. As well, if you have any information related to Paul's disappearance, please contact New Brunswick RCMP or Crime Stoppers. The family deserves to know what happened to Paul Doughty. And with that, I'll wrap up this episode of Nighttime, but before we part, I have some thanks. First, a big thanks to Cheryl for sharing her story with me and with you, the listeners of Nighttime. I'd also like to give a thanks to Monty Datta for contributing the music for this episode. It's a piece called Noir Tokyo. And lastly, but most importantly, I have a massive thanks to everyone who listens to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. But with that said, keeping the show alive is and has always been an uphill battle. So if you want to help take a bit of weight off the show's back, make sure you're listening on the premium feed. Not only does it make the show possible, it'll also give you more of each topic than you'll find here on the free feed, as I'm adding exclusive content regularly. So for about the price of a cup of coffee, go premium at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. And on the topic of the premium feed, let me thank the newest subscribers. Dallas, Kim, and Amanda, thank you for going premium. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show but can't do it with a premium feed subscription, you can give me a big hand by simply sharing this episode on social media and letting like-minded friends know what we're doing here. Also, if anyone out there has any story ideas, wants to give feedback on the show, or provide a voice memo to be aired in a future episode, you can do all that and more at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. So hopefully I'll hear from you, but until then, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.